up in San Francisco, as you know, this coordinated attempt to destroy the Occupy movement with police violence. And they were down there in Los Angeles. Now they're setting up the barricades around Occupy San Francisco so they can corral them in and tear gas them and zap them and all the rest of that. Now, interestingly enough, up in Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker has decided that the way he is going to get all of these people who are upset about the pension funds and upset about the fact that even though Wall Street destroyed the pension funds, Governor Walker's solution is to say, you don't get a pension anymore. Sorry, we know you paid into it, but hey, these are how these things happen, so you better get used to eating dog food for your retirement. So Scott Walker's solution to keep all these pesky First Amendment people out of his precious little Capitol building is to charge protesters to pay in advance for an event, a demonstration, at $50 per hour per Capitol Police officer. In other words, if you want to avail yourself of your First Amendment rights, you have to pay Governor Walker ahead of time for however many cops he feels that needs to be standing around you at $50 per hour per cop. So if he sends, 100 cops over there, that's $5,000 you got to come up with before you can get up there and say, bad governor. Now, I'd like to repeat to you, I'd like to read to you the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It is in the Bill of Rights because this is non-negotiable. Now, the definition of abridging, means to curtail or limit. So, a fee imposed by Governor Walker for protesting abridges and curtails freedom of speech for those without the money to pay his fees, thereby limiting the right to freedom of speech to the wealthy, who are not the people unhappy with the current system. Governor Walker is in violation of the First Amendment and the Constitution. On that basis alone, he should be removed from office immediately, before end of business today. Give him a cardboard box, let him take his personal possessions from the governor's office, have him turn in his keys, and get him out of there. We have to have a zero-tolerance policy for these wannabe Nazis. Now, this gets back to Occupy Wall Street, because this is how serious the situation is getting. When the NYPD came in and they broke up Occupy Wall Street and they went in there and they just, tear gassed them and zapped them and beat them and clubbed them, and they grabbed all their possessions and threw them in trucks and said, you can come get your possessions later on over at the sanitation department. The Occupy Wall Street protesters, especially their communications people, are showing up to recover and reclaim their equipment, and they're finding all of the laptops have been smashed with hammers and baseball bats. When you look at the photos of the damage, it is obviously not accidental. These machines have been pulverized to send a lesson to you, the American people. How dare you stand up to the bankers? You're not allowed to do that. Where do you think you are, the United States of America? The New York City Police Department have committed an act of war against the infrastructure of the people of the United States of America. We are under attack already. The police have attacked us in person. They are attacking our equipment. They're attacking our means of communication. They're attacking our infrastructure and our support systems. I want to go back and I want to read you something from the end of Patrick Henry's famous speech. Gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. We're in the same situation Patrick Henry was in. The police are already smashing our equipment, our computers. This is a war of information. We're not fighting with guns and bombs. We're fighting this war with keyboards. And the police are smashing our equipment. Deliberately, intentionally, it is an attack on our means of communication and organization. The war has actually begun. We hear coming down from the north up in New York or San Francisco or Washington State the clash of resounding arms as sledgehammers and baseball bats are taken to cameras and computers, Wi-Fi routers, deliberately with malice aforethought. Remember that other little part of the Constitution? No man's life, liberty, or property will be taken without due process. The police had no legal authority to confiscate, let alone deliberately destroy, all of this equipment. It's a war of attrition. The police are in the wrong. They are attacking Americans. They're attacking Americans' communication systems. They have declared war on all of us. Because we won't be willing slaves and serfs and servants anymore. Which, by the way, was what Patrick Henry was talking about at the end of his speech. It's not just bravado, give me liberty or give me death. What Patrick Henry was saying to the Bank of England in response to the Currency Act, which ordered all Americans to borrow currency from the Bank of England at interest in order to conduct business. Same system we have under the Federal Reserve. Same system that makes us a slave to the bankers. What Patrick Henry was saying, and we must repeat, we will not be your slaves any longer. We will be free or we will be dead, but we will not be your slaves any longer. The wise and prudent rulers will retire from the field and say, we've lost these slaves. Unfortunately, when you have a system where the people who are the slavers have hired mercenaries and other slaves working for them as soldiers, they don't care how many people have to die. The Federal Reserve bankers would gladly murder 100 million Americans right now, as long as it made the remaining 200 million devoted and obedient slaves in perpetuity. So that's what Patrick Henry was saying. We won't be your slaves any longer. We need to say that. All of us need to get out there and say, we're not going to be your financial, economic slaves any longer. And we need to get that message, not to Wall Street, because they're not going to listen anyway, but to all those other people around the world who have entrusted their money to the American banking system on that promise that no matter how bad things get, we, the American people, will be forced to cover all the financial losses, as we have been so far. That's what slavery is. When the government takes your work product without compensation to give to bankers and foreign investors, that is slavery. And it is time for it to stop. And the bankers are afraid, and the government are afraid. They understand how close this charade, this fraud, this illusion that we must be obedient because of manufactured debt. Just as people outgrew rule by divine right and rule by chattel ownership, we're on the verge of outgrowing rule by compound interest. And that's why the Senate passed this bill, 1867. They're trying to scare us back into the slave pens. It's not going to work. It's pissing us off. Alan Dershowitz is out there trying to say anybody who's critical of the Federal Reserve is just being anti-Semitic. That's how desperate they are to shut this thing down. We'll be back after news and commercials.